Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Toast. And yeah, so there's a good chance that you've probably already heard the news, but today's going to be a little bit different because in a shocking turn of events, the CMA decided to oppose the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition. Now, due to how many questions and ramifications this ensues, I decided we might as well just go ahead and focus on this specific topic just fully today. We'll get back to regular scheduling after this, but there's no doubt about it. This is a massive surprise for all involved, considering by all indications, it certainly seemed like the CMA was leaning in the direction of approving this buyout. They did previously dismiss Sony's complaints, which at the time was viewed as major headway, but apparently along the way, the CMA decided there was an even greater threat to competition. So yeah, we're going to dive into this today. Why it happened, Microsoft and Activision's response, what's next for the acquisition, and whether or not this is it for the deal. Spoiler alert, things are still not over. We'll get into that here in a little bit as well, but first things first. Let's go and take a look as to why the CMA decided to oppose the Activision Blizzard buyout. This is directly from their statement, which reads, Microsoft's proposal contained a number of significant shortcomings connected with the growing and fast-moving nature of cloud gaming services. It did not sufficiently cover different cloud gaming service business models, including multi-game subscription services. It was not sufficiently open to providers who might wish to offer versions of games on PC operating systems other than Windows. It would standardize the terms and conditions on which games are available, as opposed to them being determined by the dynamism and creativity of competition in the market, as would be expected in the absence of the merger. Given the remedy applies only to a defined set of Activision games, which can be streamed only in a defined set of cloud gaming services, provided they are purchased in a defined set of online stores, there are significant risks of disagreement and conflict between Microsoft and cloud gaming service providers, particularly over a 10-year period in a rapidly changing market. Accepting Microsoft's remedy would inevitably require some degree of regulatory oversight by the CMA. By contrast, preventing the merger would effectively allow market forces to continue to operate and shape the development of cloud gaming without this regulatory intervention. So, more or less, the primary reason that they blocked this buyout is simply because of cloud gaming, and interestingly enough, Windows itself. Now, this is a really strange turn of events. I don't think I can word this a different way. This is just a really strange turn of events because I think for most gamers, it's rather clear that this buyout has a much more guaranteed successful outcome for console gaming, mobile games, and console subscriptions, aka Game Pass, than it is for cloud gaming. Now, the reason for that is because cloud gaming still has a very insecure future. Yes, Microsoft is a pioneer for cloud-based gaming, but is that actually grounds for a flat-out block like this, especially in a market that is more than unproven? It is still, after all, in its infancy stage with no guarantee of success in the future. I don't think that anybody, including the CMA, can give a 100% certainty that cloud gaming is this monster in the near future. So to shut down an acquisition based on predictions on what will happen, that's certainly an intriguing way to go about regulations. It's surprising, and it's almost as if the CMA is punishing Microsoft for being a pioneer for game streaming and shutting its door before it ever even has the chance of having success. And that is actually one of the reasons that this decision caught so many people off guard. I mean, we're talking about analysts, we're talking about Wall Street, consumers, and just the general expectations by this point was that this was going to complete, in part because Microsoft has worked to alleviate cloud-based concerns. They did sign contracts with NVIDIA, Ubisoft, and Boosteroid to bring Activision Blizzard games over to their services if this deal were to complete. And here we are. The CMA said that's not enough. Boosteroid, in fact, they've already posted their response and how upset they are about this decision. They came out and said, Boosteroid team and our users disagree with the CMA's decision against Microsoft's purchase of Activision. Our position on this issue is in line with that of Microsoft's president, Brad Smith. We hope for a quick resolution to this question. So that's a whole nother dynamic here, because some of these companies that sign contracts with Microsoft, they're actually hurt by this decision as well, because, they were relying on Microsoft to make their service even better, which the CMA has kind of shut that door as well. So that's where the CMA stands currently. And with that, the question then kind of becomes, is this it for the acquisition? And the answer to that is no, it absolutely is not. If Microsoft and Activision both still want to make this happen, which it very much appears that they do, there are still avenues that they can take. It's now more about how much are they willing to fight, and it sounds like both are absolutely on board for the long haul. Microsoft's Brad Smith did respond to the decision by saying, "We remain fully committed to the acquisition and will appeal. The CMA's decision rejects a pragmatic path to address competition concerns and discourages technology innovation and investment in the United Kingdom. We have already signed contracts to make Activision Blizzard's popular games available on 150 million more devices, and we remain committed to reinforcing these agreements through regulatory remedies. We're especially disappointed that after lengthy deliberation, this decision appears to reflect a flawed understanding of this market and the way the relevant cloud technology actually works." Activision also responded, though, with an even more aggressive approach by saying, "The CMA's report contradicts the ambitions of the UK to become an attractive country to build technology businesses. We will work aggressively with Microsoft to reverse this on appeal. The report's conclusion are a disservice to UK citizens who face increasingly dire economic prospects. We will reassess our growth plans for the UK. Global innovators, large and small, will take note that, despite all its rhetoric, the UK is clearly closed for business." Now, those are fighting words in the corporate world. To repeat, they said, "We will reassess our growth plans for the UK." That almost comes off as a bit of a threat, and that actually is a possibility here. Even if the chances of this happening are low, depending on how aggressive Microsoft and Activision want to be, things could get ugly real quick. They could start to get creative in how they want to deal with the situation. Now, I'm not saying that's what will happen here, but it is certainly a possibility depending on what happens next and how much Microsoft and Activision want this to complete. That's the next part here, because that's where things start to get really interesting. A lot of what happens next seemingly hinges on the EU's decision. They're, of course, still dealing with the FTC and that whole situation, but the EU's final decision will be made within the next month. The deadline for that is currently May 22nd, and their decision could ultimately dictate what happens from this point onward. If they approve the buyout, Microsoft could start to go down that more creative avenue, especially if they also win against the FTC, which is believed that will be the final results. If the EU, however, also decides to block them, though, that's when this could ultimately be the end for this buyout. They might just then throw their hands up and say, "Okay, enough's enough. We tried, and it didn't work out." Right now, though, what we do know for a fact is that both Microsoft and Activision have publicly stated that they are set to appeal the CMA's decision, and based on the Competition Appeal Tribunal website, they say an appeal aims to be dealt within 9 months. So, yeah, you did hear that right. That means that the final decision could now drag on well into 2024. And even if Microsoft is successful with their appeal, the UK is kind of strange in the sense that this will just bounce right back over to the CMA. It's a bit of a weird setup, and there's very real questions on whether or not the CMA would even change course then. But yeah, this buyout very well could go into 2024. Yeah, the idea of Diablo 4 coming over to Game Pass day one, probably not all that likely going to happen now. You might be wondering, though, what about that June 30th deadline, which Microsoft and Activision originally aimed to complete this buyout? That's another major question that I've seen online. I've seen some people assume that this deal just dies if they don't reach that deadline, but that's not actually the case here. If we get to that point, what will happen is that Microsoft and Activision will simply just have to renegotiate their deal. That's not really that big of a problem in comparison to everything else that they're dealing with. Again, it just kind of depends on how much Microsoft and Activision are willing to fight for this, and I think that just kind of depends on what happens over the next 2 months. I mean, you're seeing it right here. Things can change fast when it comes to this buyout, and a lot of things could still change in the coming months. Even if maybe Microsoft changes the CMA's mind outside of court. That is a possibility. Then there's the EU's decision looming next month, and then, of course, they also have the FTC to deal with. But right now, as of this moment, Microsoft and Activision both seem to be on board for the long haul. What you absolutely need to know, though, despite some of the hot takes out there, because that's what people do, I saw somebody even say that this deal was 99% dead. But no, this buyout still is very much alive. There are still options that Microsoft and Activision can take, but at the same time, there's no way around this. This is a major hurdle for Microsoft, and that's the best way I can frame the situation. If anything else, this deal might not necessarily be dead, but what it is much more bleak than it was yesterday. This is the first very real situation that the buyout is in significant trouble of possibly falling through. For the time being, though, all eyes are on the EU. That very well might be the make it or break it decision. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, because I wanted to hear from you all as well. So I asked, with the CMA's decision in, do you think Microsoft will still complete the Activision Blizzard acquisition? And as you can see here, 69% of you do still believe that this will go through, while 22% of you said no. So that on one side, the majority do still believe this will ultimately complete, but we're also seeing much more no's than we've seen in the past. There definitely seems to be a lot less confidence with today's news. I think if anything, though, from what I read in the comments, several of you do believe that the CMA has a weak case. Microsoft appears to feel the same way. And I think with that, the only thing that's certain right now is that the process just dramatically lengthened unless something changes. Again, like I said before, though, a lot can still change over the 2 months, so just go ahead and buckle up, sit tightly, and as always, I'll deliver the news as soon as we hear more. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.